Hey, Coupley Fit fam. Welcome back to another episode of the Coupley Fit podcast. We are excited for this episode, like most. And this is all about the pre-marriage blueprint, keys to discuss before you say I do.
I feel like nobody really talks about the things you should discuss before you get married. People ask you like, oh, when you having kids?
When you having kids?
When are you doing this?
When
you buying a house?
Yes.
Not like, hey, these are some of the things that I would highly recommend you discussing, doing, or like preparing for before you get married. And I feel like for us, we learn so much.
Right.
And obviously being, married for 8 years, we can look back and think about the things that we maybe would have discussed or would recommend for somebody else.
Yes, absolutely. So first and foremost, we are going to talk about family and children. First, do you want kids? I think that's a newer trend that we're starting to see now is that the younger generation, kind of in the 30 and below, I'm hearing very different perspectives. Some are saying, I absolutely do not want kids. I just want to live with my significant other, travel the world, be able to financially not have to worry about, kids and after school programs and sports and everything that they may be involved in. But I think that's a key. We've heard some couples talk about, not wanting kids in the beginning of their marriage, but then when they do get married, somebody is saying, actually, I have baby fever now.
Yeah, people can change up. And I think holding space for that change up, right? Of like, is this a definite, no, you don't want to do this? Or is this a maybe or like a yes? I mean, I think back, I didn't ask this on like the first date. I know I asked on the first date, could you cook? But I did think like, man, I do wonder, like that was I don't know, maybe like a fifth, I don't know if it was fifth date, but basically once we started doing more talking and dating, like, do you want kids was something that we did discuss. Because for me, like, again, I'm the second, but the second with my last name and, got to pass on the next generation. So that would have been a deal breaker for me. If you'd have been like, you know what, not interested, I have no intention on wanting to have kids in the future, I'd have been like, you're stunning, I love you inside and out, but I don't know if, like that would have been a deal breaker, right? Okay. So I just think for people that are thinking about, man, is this the right person for me, or we're dating, like take those things serious and don't assume that you can just change somebody. Because people a lot of times I think are like, oh, they're just saying that now, but they're going to get older, or, they're saying that now, but maybe once they hit this age, they're going to then want kids. And it's like, no, that might really be who they are.
Absolutely. So two things actually that you prompted me with. Number one was the number of children, right?
That's a good point.
So
too.
Do we want kids? And then if we do, how many, right? You and I differ a little bit on how many. You just hit me with 4 like a couple of months ago. I said, excuse me? That was not something we discussed in the beginning, but being open to, okay, this is how many I want. How many do you want? Let's come to a common ground. And then this is all too if you're fortunate enough to be able to have kids.
It's true too.
Because there's a
People
statistic,
don't talk about that.
like 1 in 6, partners are not able to conceive. And so that's also why I think the pressure from outside where people are saying, when are you going to have kids? When are you going to have kids? You don't know somebody's journey. You don't know, especially for women, right? There's almost ingrained in us that, well, you're a woman, you're supposed to be able to produce kids, and if you can't, then there's something wrong with you, and then maybe you're less than, and also just you can have that feeling yourself. So I think also just being very careful about asking couples when they're going to have kids, because you have no idea what their journey is like. And that was something I wanted to make sure I pointed out, because we know some couples that have struggled with infertility, and it's sad, it's difficult, it can be even something that, people start kind of growing apart or like pulling away from each other a little bit too, if you have grief, right? If there's miscarriages and things like that too.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I just think about, sometimes people can be insensitive.
Yes.
When they ask questions. I mean, I remember, one of my football coaches from the University of Akron, he said, how come you don't have any kids yet, man? Are you shooting blanks?
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, no.
Oh my gosh.
No, I'm not. But we just, us waiting, having a business, those types of things. But it's just like, sometimes people, jump to a conclusion of like, is something wrong with you? And I was like, no, man, ain't nothing wrong. Like, but that's just like, was his assumption by seeing like, well, you got married a few years ago, you haven't had kids. So I just think it's a really interesting topic, but being able to discuss that beforehand, like think about being caught off guard if maybe you, like we discussed it, but if you hadn't, like you could kind of be blindsided, you're like, oh, what, getting married or you're on your honeymoon, you're like, oh man, I'd love to start a family. And they're like, no, I'm not interested in kids. You're like, what? Awkward.
Awkward. And to add to what you mentioned too, is that when it comes to timelines, people feel like, right, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes baby in a baby carriage.
Whoever came up with that saying, they didn't mention the $23,000 that it costs.
Okay.
Estimated. This is not Kurt's stat. They said the stat's like 20 to 23,000 per kid per year.
First year, right?
For the first year, I think that's the first year.
Yes.
But like, we talking to somebody, they said childcare alone could be $2,000 for the month
for each child, and they have 3 kids.
I was like, you got to get 2 jobs just for childcare,
right? And then when people are pressuring you or just asking you that question of when you're going to have kids, are you taking care of these kids?
Good question.
Are you going to be babysitting these kids? These are all questions that people are like, oh no, I just want to see it. I just want to look on,
I just want to double tap on the gram.
Yeah, that's
Facebook.
It. It's cute and I love it. And it's like, well, hold on now. There's true responsibilities that come with it. And if you're not prepared for that, we've seen a lot of people struggle. We've seen a lot of people struggle in their first couple of years because it's very expensive to have a child. Go ahead.
No, I was saying to your point on the expensive side, that opens up another like element when you talk about like the premarital discussion or the premarital blueprint is finances.
Yes.
Like how are we, some people have the dream of like, oh, I'm going to be a stay-at-home dad or a stay-at-home mom or, we're going to travel the world together. But it's like, okay, you just said you wanted 3 or 4 kids. So who's watching the kids? Are they traveling? Like there's so many, and it's not like being paralysis by analysis. It's more so just like having the initial discussion of like, what does our life look like?
Correct.
How, in a perfect world, because right now we don't have any kids or maybe we're not married yet for some people, you're able to literally script this out and make a plan for what you would want life to be like.
Absolutely. And you actually hit on a couple of points that we're going to get to, but quickly to wrap up on the kids piece as well. When you're thinking about having kids as well, like for us, we had multiple couples around us that didn't start their family for 5, 6, 7 years. So for us, it's not uncommon that we're 8 years in and we don't have kids yet. It's because we've also seen that around us. And then also...
No, in that example of the people that we were seeing, how they were living was also different.
Listen, living their best life. They're on a cruise every month. They're getting up and going whenever you want. And that's one thing we also heard because we did the due diligence not only, beforehand, before we got married, but also while we've been married of asking parents, hey, what changes, right? Not only between your dynamic, but then also what changes just in your lifestyle. And one of the main things we heard was the get up and go.
Freedom.
The freedom and the get up and go. So we said, okay, well, let's try to kind of elongate this as long as possible because once we have kids, we know for us and the way that we want to parent, which actually goes into parenting styles, is going to be very different. And then I also feel like depending on where you are in your age, in our 20s, I don't think we had the patience to really handle multiple kids. And we've talked about that before. We were like, oh my gosh, I just feel like we wouldn't have been ready. Although you're excited, right? Like our goal was to have 2 kids before the age of 30. And then I said, oh no, let's do 1 kid first. And then let me do my 30th snapback. And then we'll have another one, right? But again, it's one of those things where, you tell God your plans and he laughs type of situation. And so I think this goes right into also parenting styles, right? When you talk about family and children, how do you want to parent your kids? And are you both going to parent the same way? Are you going to be authoritarian? Are you going to be, there's also, hopefully nobody's neglecting, but that's a part of the diagram. But how do you want to talk to your kids? I know for both of us, when we were looking at the parenting styles, one of them mentioned essentially like, I'm the parent, you're the child, you do anything and everything I say, you don't have a voice, you are only, you're only going to be talking back to me if I talk to you first, right? We said, we've lived that lifestyle.
Yeah, that's very familiar.
It's very familiar, and that's not what we're looking for.
As they say, as they used to say, stay in a child's place.
Yes.
And you're like, hold on. I'm just asking questions about what's for dinner.
But then also, like, when do I stop becoming a child?
That's
right?
True. You're a child forever. Depending on who you're talking to, you're a child forever.
Okay. So there's those pieces too, right? What type of parenting style are you looking for? And the other one that I know we mentioned when we were looking was we do, like, our kids will have a voice. Yeah. We're going to be, give you a choice on this is choice A, choice B. It's up to you to make that choice. We'll give you the tools and resources, but know that there's consequences, right, for each choice. And so don't be surprised if a consequence comes because of whatever choices you've made, right? And so on and so forth on more of a teaching kind of mentoring style is what we were looking to do.
Yeah, and I like that you said that too, because when you think about the teaching or just the approach, and for anybody that's listening, whatever approach you choose is totally fine.
Right.
But it's being on the same page that approach.
Right.
Because so many times, if you're moving in different directions, it's hard to move forward, right? And that, I think, is a barrier for a lot of people.
Yes. And so then we can talk about family dynamics, right? What is your family dynamic within your group, like within your spousal group, but then also what's the family dynamic outside, right? Like your closest family. What does that look like? Do you have family members that are maybe a little bit more, we'll say, attentive? Or maybe overbearing, or that are very supportive, right? Like looking at your family dynamic and saying like, okay, how does this correlate with not only us and our support system, but then also, as we were talking about, your children as well.
Yeah, and that's such a great call out too, because there's so many dynamics at play, right? Like not only are you talking about, the Bible talks about the greatest mystery is that of marriage and finding a spouse, right? But then when you think about that mystery, it's because two people are coming from two different worlds,
yes.
two different experiences, lives, everything. But then you have families that come from different backgrounds, different places, all of that, and you're putting everybody into one room and you're saying we're now all coming together.
Yes.
And how are we doing that? And
yes.
what does that look like? And I think something that is a really good topic to discuss and just to be mindful of is, does each family feel like they're gaining a son or a daughter, or do they feel like they are losing a loved one or immediate family member because, oh my gosh, you're now with your spouse, or now you're spending more time there instead of with us? And hopefully it can be an addition versus feeling like it's a subtraction from what you're currently used to. Yes,
that was a great point. I appreciate you bringing that up. So next we're going to get into career aspirations. When we look at, the top 3 reasons that families, or more so spouses, get divorced, it was career, finances, and children, unfortunately. So that's why if we talk about these things beforehand and see where each one of us stand, we'll have a better understanding of not only what the expectations are, but then also what we want, like what are our aspirations. So when it comes to career, what's the work-life balance? What does that look like? What are the expectations of the career as well? Like, do you want to move up? Or do you kind of like where you are, and do you want to stay where you are? But then also moving. Are we going to move for our career? That is something too that you talk about uprooting, right? Your entire family. And as we know, right, professional athletes, we've seen that time and time again, especially when you talk to some of your friends that are, in the NFL, NBA, or the professional sports. The moving is difficult, where sometimes you'll have the family stay in one state because that's where they were originally drafted, or that's where their team was, but now they have to move somewhere else the next year. And how difficult that must be to do that and uproot your family like that.
Yeah, and to your point on the moving, you think about militaries the same way. There's so many jobs when you're relocating that it can require potentially your spouse, especially if you have kids, to stay home.
Yes.
Right? Like, and that's either way, male or female, where you may have to stay home because you just moved, or your job, your partner's job is remote. And I think that work element, so many times I think people miss the aspirational piece that your partner might have.
Yes.
Because you've got to be willing to understand and see, like, no, I'm with someone that's aspirational. And a lot of people want that.
And a high achiever.
A lot of people want a high achiever. They say, like, man, I really want a high achiever. I want somebody that has, they're aspirational and they're hungry, they're driven, all of these things, but they're not ready when they're up at 4 a.m.
Correct.
and they're working 14, 15-hour days.
Yes.
Or they're traveling and different things, or they're in that mode where they're like, I can only see what I want to get accomplished.
Right.
And so there takes a lot of understanding in that sense. And I think about a great example. I mean, the GOAT, Tom Brady, big time Patriot
On
fan.
TB12?
TB12, but Tom, right, it was like, no, I still love the game. I may be
Yes.
40, but I still love football. I'm still playing it.
retiring.
I'm
I'm
still
coming out of
playing.
retirement.
I'm playing at a high level. I'm going to keep doing it. Like, I'm dominating. Goes to the Tampa Bay Bucks, wins a Super Bowl. He's supposed to ride off in the sunset, and he's like, change of plans. I don't feel ready to ride off in the sunset. And it's like, I can understand where he's coming from, because once the game ends, it ends. And he's been doing it for 30 years, right? All of the things. But when you flip the switch and think about his partner, and you think about Giselle or his wife, ex-wife, you're like, she thought you were done 2
Yes.
years ago
Yes.
or 5 years ago. And now it appears like you're choosing football over your
Correct.
family.
Yes, yes, yes.
And now some could say you could lose your family, or you're making a sacrifice. And I think that's so tough. But if you can have the conversation beforehand and then continue to have that dialogue, because I think it's not just a premarital blueprint or a premarital discussion. It's a continued
Yes.
discussion of like, hey,
Expectations.
we've talked about that on different things career-wise of like, hey, what's the vision? Are you planning to do this for 5 years, 10 years? Is this
Yes.
a short term? And I think just the open dialogue makes a huge difference.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And yeah, Tom, that was a sad moment. That was
I mean, and then the roast, I mean, they went in on time. I was
oh my
like,
gosh,
this is a GOAT. You guys are just tearing them down up here. I couldn't even believe it.
Yeah.
The audacity.
humiliation ritual.
Yeah, that's not cool.
All right, so then we're going to jump into finances, which you briefly talked about when we were mentioning family and children. So how are we going to budget, right? How much do we want to save? Our debt, how do we want to pay it off, i.e. student loans? That's something that's a hot topic right now where, a lot of people are going into, not deferment, but they are default. They're getting into default on their student loans, and now wages are being garnished.
Ooh.
And now, alimony even is being garnished. So it's really difficult there. What are your financial goals? And then also, I think what needs to be talked about before you get married is who is in charge of the finances. And it needs to be somebody, that has the experience to be able to do that. It's not easy, right, to talk about finances at all when you have spreadsheets and, all of the things that can come with it. But I know even for us, when we first were married, probably our first 3 or 4 years, we had our, joint bank account, but then we still had our separate bank accounts where we were just paying like our individual, car insurance, car payments, right? Those things. And then once we started Coupley Fit, and finances are getting a little bit tighter because we are self-funding, it turned into like, okay, who's the best at managing these finances? Right. Now, don't get me wrong. We were in our 27, 28 when this conversation happened. And, we found out that I was better at managing the finances. And, something you mentioned to me was like, I don't ever want to have to worry about finances. I don't have to worry about, like you said, going to the gas pump.
Moments you'll never forget.
I know that hit. I knew that hit.
It's moments that you'll never forget. I still remember the pump and everything. When your car gets declined and you're like, oh no, I think there's. Then you check the app and you're like, oh no, it's actually less money in there than I thought.
And we might be in the negative.
We're in the red.
We're in the red.
It's humbling. And so I think that experience of you not wanting to financially struggle, and to be honest, a big shift that happened for me that I realized too was knowing everybody's strengths.
Yes.
So sometimes you could be like, oh, well, who managed the finances, for your parents or when you were growing up, or the man is supposed to manage all the finances. I think it's, to your point, who is the best person that's most equipped or fit. Like, you were the treasurer at your high school. Like, that's huge. Like, you're the treasurer at your high school. If there's anything that's like a pre-qualification, that is one. Secondly, for me, I'm very much more focused on like the drive and the like almost go out and go get it, and even like the day to day.
Yes.
But like the forecasting of like, we've got to look at
savings
this for
and paying off debt,
and some of those, like, I appreciate you focusing on that, because for me, I'm like, I'm trying to secure the bag like right now, today. We're on it. What are the deals we could close? And also kind of that like making more mindset of like, okay, if I want to do more, it's not about yes cutting expenses. It's about we got to make more, right? Like, what are the ways I can do that? But I appreciate the mindset of like, no, let's really get into the P&L, profit and loss here. Let's really look at the spreadsheet and see that you've got way too many subscriptions.
That's right.
And you're not even watching these shows.
That's
and I was
right.
like, you know what?
And to do an audit of your finances. And then something else too that we discussed before, you know, you were fortunate enough as an athlete to have most of your education taken care of.
100%.
All of it taken care of. For me, wasn't the same. I had to take out student loans. I was working full time, but I was living on my own. I had my own car. Like, I had a lot of bills during the time of being in college. So I did have some student loan debt. So we had that conversation before of, hey, how do you feel? Like, this is kind of how much I have. And how do we want to like pay this down, and how do we want to go about it? And so having those candid conversations, they're not easy. I do recommend taking a few breaks in between, kind of space them out.
I'll never forget you had all the numbers up on the whiteboard.
And all the numbers just start blending together. You're like, listen, I'm in a fog right now.
It was like the Matrix. I was just seeing numbers.
And I loved it. I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. This is, by this time, we're going to be out of here. By this time, we're going to be profitable. By this time, we're going to do this. You're like, yeah, great.
I was like, okay, how many deals I need to close
tomorrow? Like, what? What do I need to do? Like, what do we need to, how do we need to go get it? So finances is major. Yeah. Highly recommend talking about it. There are a lot of also tools and resources, whether it comes to books, whether it comes to talking to like your family CPA, right? Or somebody that's in the financial background space, to be able to help you along as well. You know, Rich Dad, Poor Dad was always obviously a great book to read, and just having Living Your Rich Life Too. That's another, it's on YouTube. You can follow him. He is, I think he's the most relatable that I've seen when it comes to finances, where he actually has like a budget calculator.
I like that.
And he gives you an opportunity to also spend your money, because I know that's what a lot of people look to do, is like, okay, I just made this money. Like, I'm going to spend a little something.
Money's burning a hole in my pocket.
So definitely talking about finances before you get married is a key. So then we go into values and beliefs.
One thing on finances before we get to values and beliefs, yes. I just wanted to say a term that I love that we got hip to later on, but dinking it. And they were like, oh, you guys are dinking it. I was like, what? Woo! What are you talking about?
Love it.
Dual income, no kids.
Come on.
Wait, 2 incomes.
You guys are living that dink life.
I was like, oh. But like, to me, that was such a great takeaway in term, because dinking it was like, oh, what's the benefit of waiting to have kids is dual income, no kids. So if you do want to make some more moves, travel a little bit more, or invest in a business or an idea, or like take more risks, you can make more calculated risks, because it is the two of us and we can work through it, versus like, man, it's one thing if me and you
can't take this risk because we have kids.
Come on, it's one thing if me and you got to live off a protein shake and, you know, a Cliff Bar
and
bone broth, but we can't make the baby live off of, you know, like, no, you just have milk. Yeah. But you get what I mean? Like, so I think just that process and perspective will help a lot of people too, of like, there are benefits in waiting to start your family and knowing, like, weighing out those pros and cons.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up, because we love the dink life. Listen. And we've seen some people
living their
best lives. We said, "Ooh, okay, you guys are making us like."
I see where y'all saving that $20,000 from that first year. I see it. Your diamond, your diamonds are dancing.
Yes. Okay, so then we'll go into values and beliefs. So, what are your personal values? What are your religious beliefs?
Oh, that's a big one.
That's a big one. Also, cultural backgrounds as well. And then, do you believe in premarital counseling? So we can kind of touch a little bit on both of those. Thankfully for us, our personal values were relatively the same. They're pretty much the same, honestly. But that's a huge piece to really talk about, what do you value, right? Like, what do you believe in? And that even goes into the religious beliefs. We've had quite a few couples that we've talked to, too, that come from different cultural backgrounds. So then they come from different religious backgrounds, and then they have kids, and now they're having the conversation of, okay, how do we want to raise our kids? Or even for us, how do we want to function in this religious space as well?
No, it's a great call out, and I think that's so missed by a lot of people is having the discussion, and it's okay. Having the discussion doesn't mean that everything has to be perfect, that
Right.
everyone has to be the same, but it does prepare you to work through some things or to see like, ooh, is this an area that like we need to have more discussion, or this is something we can take into that counseling before we get married. But for us, to your point on the values, and this is something like I think a lot of people can use this tip for the early dating stages, seeing if someone's values align with yours, but then also seeing if their actions match their words.
Right.
Because so often, and I'm just gonna keep it 100, right? We see people like in their bio is a scripture, but then you look at their first post and it's like middle fingers up, like all of, you're like, whoa. I thought I was coming to the page of,
Yes.
someone is this, and it's
God
like
first.
God first, and it's like I get to your bio and you're roughing people up.
Yeah.
And so I think like to that point, making sure that the person, okay, you're telling me that these are your values, but now I'm spending time with you to see, are you living these values?
Correct.
Because there can be a disconnect, and when there is that disconnect, it helps you bridge that before you get to the premarital side. But now you're like, okay, no, we both have the same response to that, reaction to that, thing. So I think that makes a huge difference on that initial stage.
Man, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I think you are so right with having those actions match those words, right? And as we know, actions speak louder than words. But I quickly want to go back to the religious piece because I did grow up in a household that was two religions. And my mom is Catholic and my dad was a later on in life Jehovah's Witness. And I remember, we went from celebrating Christmas, celebrating holidays, celebrating birthdays to all of a sudden not doing that. And my mom, who's Catholic, she very much like Easter and Christmas, those are her holidays. And so it got to a point sometimes where, my dad would ask her like not to put up a Christmas tree. And so she's devastated, just like, what do you mean? This is not how we started life off. I didn't, my dad didn't introduced me into the JW world until I was in middle school. Wow. So we had quite some time before where we're celebrating everything. And now all of a sudden you're asking her not to do that. And I remember when the time would come around, she would just, be down on herself, right? Or just down on the season. And it was sad to see. And then it's also the going back and forth where, she's like, oh, the Catholic guilt. And so that's why, the husband takes care of the finances and those things. But he wasn't the right one to be taking care of the finances, right? So I think talking about that beforehand is so key. And then also premarital counseling. That was something that we did before we were married. We did decide to go with our pastor. When we talk about religion, right? We did decide to go with our pastor. We had quite a few sessions. And, we just worked through just more so, again, talking about what are your values, what are your beliefs, how do you deal with conflict, right? Those type of things.
Yeah, and to that point on the religious side, I'm glad that we had those discussions because to your point, we're bringing in, you mentioned, Catholic and then also Jehovah's Witness. I went to a Catholic high school before I moved to Arizona, growing up Christian as well. And then the discussion of like, okay, how do we see ourselves moving forward from a faith perspective? And then is it just flipping a switch and it's like, oh, we're going to go to church once we have kids or later on down the line? But we were going to church together, to your point. Our pastor at the time doing the premarital counseling with the pastor, those things were also a part of our dating experience that I think I would definitely recommend because also,
I agree.
Again, you're seeing, and I'm just being honest, right? But like it's that opportunity on the value side. Like for me, I appreciate the fact that you know when to be maybe a little bit more conservative. What you're wearing to church isn't what you're wearing to the club.
Right.
You know that, but like some people don't, like they might wear the same outfit, the same dress, whatever, which I'm not judging, but like those are just things where you can see like, okay, do the values align? Do the like what we both view as like acceptable align? And then how do we take that information and then take like that foundation and build on it by having someone else from the outside that isn't mom or dad or a sibling come and give you perspective that can help you in marriage moving forward. I definitely recommend it.
Yes, absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about, our values, beliefs, finances, career aspirations, family and children, but then let's really get into it. What are the expectations of marriage?
Oh,
right? So what are your personal expectations regarding roles,
am I getting 3 squares a day?
res- responsibilities, and then the overall vision, right? And so I think also when we talk about the overall vision, I'm speaking more so for myself, but I've also talked to other women as well who said, you know, I am a partner to my husband, but I want my husband to lead. I want a leader in the family where he's going to lead us in the right direction, going back to the values and beliefs, right? And the overall vision of what you want for our family. And I'm your partner in doing that, but I want you to come with that leadership. And so I think that's something that's a little bit of a struggle right now, especially as we talk to women that are dating and they're trying to find, you know, their next spouse or mate or just companion. Is, you know, that leadership piece from the male side is shifting, especially as we're seeing more women get into the workforce that are starting their own businesses. You know, that leadership aspect is changing in some ways. And then also, right, what are your personal expectations regarding roles? Something that I've heard too is also that, you know, kind of like who signs the kids up for their activities, but then who takes them?
Oh.
Because if you're signing the kids up for all the activities and I'm taking them, like, I didn't sign up for that.
Yeah, I mean, you all have already told me that when we have kids, you're like, you're taking them. You're going to be the coach.
Well, you're going to be the coach. That's why you're taking them. So that's,
That
you know.
too. But no, but it's just good that we're setting expectations and that those are things that you talk about, because to that point, like there can be a disconnect there. And I hear a lot of what you're saying from on the women's side. If you are a professional woman leading, you're wearing the hat of like, I am, you know, taking charge.
Yes.
But then it's hard, I'm sure, to then come into a situation at home where it's like, okay, I'm now the expectation, or my partner wants me to take a back seat, not take the charge, but it is who's in the seat of the leader. Because to your
Right.
point, if whoever, regardless of a gender, whoever's in the position to be that leader and to be that head of the household or to help, and my vision would be, right, doing it together, being equally yoked. Like to your point, right, I want to be that head of the household, and like I'm the head of the household, but we're CEOs in
Yes.
this, right? Like we're both
Literally.
co-GMs, like in the household and in the process. And so when you have that perspective, it's how can I also serve? So if I have that servant leadership approach, because I see a lot of guys, it's like, I'm the man, I'm in charge, I'm at the head of the house, but then you're not helping out with
Your
dishes.
actions are not matching your words.
You're not matching. You're not bringing that level of like, yes, you're leading, but are you leading by example? Are you also serving? You're not just giving orders and dictating what needs to happen, but like, I'm helping out and lending a hand and doing the things to be able to also contribute, and not just from a financial or business aspect, but like on the home front, doing chores on those responsibilities that go into all of the things that could make up a family.
Yes, it's so key to talk about your expectations, you know, before marriage. And then we've mentioned in previous episodes too, you need to have that check-in throughout your marriage, right? Marriage is a lifetime. I think people may lose sight of that, of when you say I do, you're saying I do to us building a life together. And so this goes also though into what are the expectations when it comes to affection, right? And intimacy on the physical side, the emotional side, and then also like how do you want me to express my love language, and then also you expressing yours, and how can we make this be something that is cohesive across the board?
Yeah, the 5 love languages was one of the gifts that we got on our wedding day, which was a
Yes.
great book going into the love languages, but then also revisiting that conversation of like, how have the love languages changed? Right?
Yes.
Because like, yes, physical touch, but then also like receiving some gifts. I mean, brother's birthday's around the corner and I'm ready,
You're
right?
ready.
But I just
think
said,
receiving gifts is number one. You say it's the way you light up. I think it is. I think it is.
sometimes physical touch is receiving a gift.
Okay. Agreed.
So it's a twofer. So
It's a twofer.
yeah, I think those are my top 2. But I just
Yes.
think revisiting and having that discussion makes
And
a
words
huge
of
difference.
affirmation.
And words of affirmation, so you can pour in and fill up the right aspects of your partner's love tank.
Yes, absolutely. And to your point with the love languages, right? Like you just mentioned, those can evolve and staying open to them evolving as well. I know for me, quality time, when we first got married, I had more emphasis on that. I still have that same emphasis, but then also acts of service too, right? When you do help me with the dishes, or just yesterday,
Glove up.
yes, I was, chefing it up, and the floor gets dirty, right? Other things get dirty, and you were just helping me, just on that side, be able to clean up. So again, that's always appreciated.
Oh, you're welcome. And for the fellas, if your partner is willing to whip up a delicious meal or even order a delicious meal, least you can do is throw out the trash, or, sweep up a little bit and help out. So no question.
Yes. And speaking of, just fellas, and fellas like social life. They like friendships. Yes, women do too, but the fellas getting together for, that's what I think of. That's exactly what I think of. Same with girls' night, right? You want to be able to have that time away, but what are the expectations for socializing, right? And friendships. Also, do you feel like your partner has the right friends? That's also another piece too, because by you investing into your personal development, you're growing and evolving, but are your friends also growing and evolving with you? Or are they keeping you kind of stagnant in some old mindset thinking, or whatever that may look like?
And we both had some friends that we had to
Transition away from.
slow ghost, slowly fade, or just the relationship, right? You continue growing and you realize we don't have as much to talk about anymore.
Correct.
Or I'm not reaching out to you and you're not reaching out to me anymore, and it just slow ghosts. But to your point, taking the feedback from your partner of, are these friends helping me get to the best version of myself?
Yes.
Are these friends helping me get to where I want to be professionally, personally, emotionally, even spiritually? And sometimes if the answer is no, then okay, it's okay to go through a growing season of either finding friends or going through that. What am I looking for in friends, and finding that right complement? But that's a huge one. And then also, I think having that discussion about the hanging out or the time that you're going to spend with friends, et cetera, like me being in a fraternity, I think about you were super understanding of, one, being in a fraternity. There's times where, like, again, me being a younger member, I got to be the first one there and the last one to leave. And it's not just like, oh, you're hanging out, but you're also like cleaning up, you're bringing water, you're bringing food, things like that, because you're, around the older brothers. And so you understanding that makes a huge difference versus being like, it's 8:00. Where are you? It's like, hey, I know you have this event. Like, it might run a little bit long, but also the communication.
I was just going to
say, it's just a text. It's an audio message. Let me know what's
going on.
Right? Even something as simple as, like, and it depends on the relationship, but sometimes if your partner is like, hey, I want to be mindful of, like, my partner and updates, turn on the read receipts, send your location. Like, some of these things are like, oh, is it overly communicating? But sometimes, like, that's that peace of mind of, like, I know you're good. I know you made it there safely. I know you saw my message, or maybe you got busy and didn't respond, but, like, those can be little difference makers.
Right. And then benefit of the doubt, right? That goes into that.
That's the biggest one.
For sure. And then you were, essentially mentioning the balancing of the time with friends and family. And what does that look like? Because we know quite a few people who would rather be with their friends than be with their spouse. And they're spending too much time kind of cultivating and fostering those relationships, but not the one that's at home. And, that can lead to a disengagement, right? And amongst other things. But it's just, again, having that balance of your social life and your friendships, and not being afraid that when you do evolve and grow, that, like Lala Anthony said, some friendships here are for a season or for a reason, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's, you grow, you evolve, you hope that your friends grow and evolve with you, but sometimes it is a shedding almost of a version of yourself to then get you to your best version of yourself. 100%. So after that, we have support systems, which are so key. Before you are married, like, who is your support system, right? Maybe writing that out of, these are the friends, these are the families, these are the organizations that I'm a part of that also make me feel supportive. And then also, who are the ones that are going to support you during a challenge, right? Because you can have friends. We all know, like, if you're able to tap into your friendships where it's like, okay, I know if I'm going through something, this is the friend I talk to. I know if I want, like, laughs, giggles, chuckles, this is the friend, right? And you can kind of break that down. But how to support each other during a challenge is I think critical when we talk about friendships. And then who can you rely on? And then if you do need to move, for your support system, right? We've had some people recently who have had kids and realize like, oh my gosh, I have no support system where I am. I need it. I need to go move back to where I am or closer to my parents. And is that okay? Right? Like discussing that, which goes back to that first piece that we talked about with your family and children. Are you willing to move?
Yeah, and I think even having that dialogue of how are the interpersonal relationships between your spouse and that person that's going to be the support system or the help.
Yes.
So if it's
that's
grandma
key.
or mom or dad, make sure that's a great interaction or relationship between you and your partner, because now if they're moving in, for example, to help
Yes,
out with
of
taking care of the
course.
kids, or moving in because they maybe, get sick, which we see happen a
We
lot
do. We
as
do.
families get, people get older.
Yes.
How do you guys respond to that? Because if that person is a sticking point for your partner and now you're like, oh, they're moving in, or hey, I just want to give you an update, so and so is going to be helping us, that could create some of the contention or create some of the difficulty in the communication or in your relationship with your partner.
Absolutely. And do you trust them, right? Like, do
Correct.
I trust you not only with my kids, but then also like if you're in my space, like you just said, if it's a parent or somebody that's moving into your house, which we're seeing, like you said,
A lot.
a lot of caregivers, and you may not necessarily be ready for that, but this person may need that type of support right now. What does that look like? And having those conversations of, who can we rely on in these situations? I think that's critical. That's huge. So as we're talking about, kind of family members moving in, right? That's a little bit more of the future goals or just the future talk. And so what are some of those long-term dreams that you may have? What are your career changes, right? Like, do you want to, for example, my dad, right? He went from being a police officer to a teacher to a personal trainer, right? And having those conversations with your spouse of, okay, what if I do want to change careers and I have to take a break here? Can we sustain, and having those in-depth conversations, but then also personal growth and then aspirations, which we touched upon earlier in the episode as well.
Yeah, and then that's such a great call out, because I think about my background with sports, and something that we talked about early on was like, how would you feel about me coaching? And I was like,
Yes.
although I love football and it's something I would be great at, the demands of like the 50,
Yes.
it's really like 60, 70-hour weeks at times, and you're pouring
Right.
into all
Might
of
as
your
well be a player.
athletes. I mean, man,
I mean,
you feel like it, but I just
basically.
can't make the plays.
Yeah.
But
Calling them.
right,
But
but to that point, it was like, hey, how would you feel about that? And the moving and the relocating and all of the pieces, climbing up the ranks. It's a journey. We were like, ooh, and you were honest. You were like, babe, that's like, that life is not for me. And I was like, I appreciated you being trained. And really, you were like the athlete life too. Like, I don't want to be the wife of
this
an
was in the
NFL
first
player.
couple of months of dating.
First day, you were like, I do
I
not
was
want
like,
to be.
no, I'm okay.
I'm good.
Yeah.
And
Please do you. We'll stay friends. Like, have your aspirations. You were in like 3 bowl games in 2 or 3 weeks. And, that's your goal. That's what you wanted to do. That's what you wrote down when you were 13 years old, on your goals and aspirations sheets that you still have to this day, which is so cute. But that was something for me I don't want that. That's not something that's in my agenda and my future goals, but I'll support you in any way that I can. And,
But it's a blessing, because on that end, you were, in my opinion, a rare example where you're like, I don't want you to be a pro athlete or NFL player. But a lot of people are in a situation where their partner might be like, oh no, I am anticipating that you're going to be the face of
yes.
the league.
Come on now.
And if that doesn't work out,
I'm plotting on
they're
it.
disappointed, or it's like you let us down, or
Yes.
you didn't achieve what we needed.
Yes.
Versus where are we both going, and where are we going together for the future? Because plans change, but you can still elevate together.
Yes. That's fantastic. I'm glad that we left off on the elevate together. I think that's key. So these are some tips for the pre-marriage blueprint. Key topics to discuss before saying I do. I'm going to quickly go over them before we close out. We have family and children, career aspirations, finances, values and beliefs, expectations of marriage, intimacy and affection, social life and friendships, support system, and lastly, future goals.
And that was perfect. I think those were such great tips. And I want to say one of my biggest takeaways too for those that are listening is that relationships don't have to be what you see in the media, on the
Yes.
news. It's negative. You know, your
Yes.
partner's the ball and chain. You're trying to get away from them or hang out with everybody else. You can be in a relationship where you enjoy quality time, you enjoy the experiences. Literally, your partner is your best friend, and that exists out there. These are just some of the ways that we think you can find that in today's world.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you, Coupley Fit fam, for watching and listening to another episode. If you are watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're following us on social media, we are at Coupley Fit, COUPLEYFIT. Bye.